So, welcome to this episode. Let's talk about FM synthesis and wavetables because you haven't really heard about them right now. So, actually, FM synthesis is really complicated. It's a different kind of synthesis. So, what we do here on the synthesizer is called subtractive synthesis. So, we subtract, we take away stuff with the filter and shape or sound the way we want. And we take away volume with these envelopes basically, because if we set an attack to a value like this, we are basically saying let's take away volume from the beginning, or let's take away volume from here. So this is what we call subtractive synthesis. FM, however, is called frequency modulation. So FM is a different kind of synthesis, and the third synthesis that is out there as a type is additive synthesis, which is really rare. It's on Zebra, maybe, if you know it from Yuhe, from this company. It's a German company. And the last and fourth really known synthesis type is granular, which is pretty new, and Pigments is capable of this as well. Actually here in the granular tab, but this is something really advanced, so we won't be covering this in this basic to intermediate course here, because we want to talk about what you will find on almost any synthesizer. Wavetable is a pretty modern technique that is given on most synthesizers today, so this is really important to cover. What is special about Wavetable is, let me actually... Yeah, I think we can just work with this patch here, I hope. So what is special about Wavetable is that if you click here on 3D, it has more than one waveform. So if we work with a saw wave, right, like this, or we work with a pulse wave, or with a triangle wave. But Wavetable has a lot of them stacked behind each other, you could say so, and they are all a little bit different from each other. So as you see, the last one here is pretty linear, while this first one is really distorted. So even if I show this in 2D, and I bring this position up now, we would suspect it to smooth out, like the last one that we see, while the first one is pretty interrupted, like you can see here. And this has effect on the sound, of course. So if I play a note... Okay, maybe this is not the best patch to show this. Let's take a lead patch. So we have a more open filter. Where are my leads? Final floor. I think we can work with this. So... let's see what they have here for us. So, for instance, we have this waveform here, and if I swipe through, you can see the sound changes because we changed the waveform. So basically what you can think of is that wavetables offer you instruments that are more organic. They have more movement. So what we always try to create with LFOs, and so what we did on the earlier lessons, it's already given here by default in the wavetable. If you want to change the position, you don't need to make use of this. You can just say, hey, I want a crazy waveform like this for my sound, and just using this, because every waveform sounds different. So you don't need to make use of this just because it's there, but it's an opportunity for you to make your sound move and add some life to it if you want. So let's find something. I like this one, even if it's sort of quiet. Can increase the volume here, I guess. And then you see there's a lot of new stuff down here. So first of all, we have a modulator. This is basically the same that you know from a modulation tab down here. We have used this quite a few times. This is a modulator, which we can't hear now, but we can increase the volume and set the waveform to, let's, sawtooth. And by the way, here the proof that I was right when I told you that ramp is probably the inverted sawtooth. It's actually what I told you earlier, if you remember this, just a little side note. So this modulator is basically an oscillator. Dialing this in is nothing different from dialing in a saw wave from here. So this, in its very core, it's just oscillator, but it's a modulator as well, which means that this oscillator is being fed into these different modules here. The same way that this modulation here feeds the third oscillator into our oscillator 1 and 2, like we did in the past. So this is the same principle that you already know. And the same way that this is being always fed into 1 and 2, even if the volume is turned down and we can't hear it, is the same principle here as well. Even if I turn this down, it's not affecting this here now. Or let's actually try. Yeah, I think it's not affecting it, but it will affect these things here. If we start to do this, then you can see that messing with these knobs will change this here, because it's being still fed in, even if we can hear it, because the way it's fed in means just that this waveform here is being mixed into whatever module we have here to change its shape. So it's not about the audible part, not about what you can hear. It's more about the things that happen in the background. So let's first of all cover these modules, and then we will be talking about the modulator. So we have this frequency modulation here, which is FM. We cover this after this. Now we talk about wavetables. FM is what we did here with this modulation button. I will explain this later to you. But this is basically doing the same thing. It feeds this here into the frequency modulation. So this is actually modulating the frequency of this waveform. And by frequency, from our equalizer video, you know what is meant by frequency, right? The spectrum that we have. So here we can change the mode. Exponential, if you know it from mathematics, is just like each time duplicates. So 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16. So basically you can say it just applies this way harder. It duplicates itself, which you can even hear. Getting really, really gritty. Then we have the phase modulation, which just messes with the phase of the waveform. So this, if you turn this to the opposite, it simply inverts the waveform. This changes the way it sounds like, of course, because the waveform changes. Yeah, and here we can probably just change the source. So if our key should affect this, or if we have our modulator, oscillator affecting this. But this is not really important right now. Then we have the phase distortion, which is first of all the amount, and then we can start modulating it. So just adds a little bit of distortion and changes the phase. So by phase is just meant the position of the waveform. It's like when we move this phase knob here. And then the wave folding. You remember the wave folder from our effect video. It's a really harsh distortion module. So what is really cool, and let me pick another waveform for this. We can take our LFOs to do stuff with this. We can modulate this. So we can use this on all these parameters. Maybe this one isn't good, but so you see now we have created a lot of movement on these parameters. If you combine this with the glide time maybe now, just to experiment. I think that's pretty cool. Just to show you one way to use this. And again, like if I play this on high notes, really not impressive, because as I told you, if you play the high notes, you have all the high frequencies and all these cool modulations that we do that at high end is not really audible. It's like my analogy with the lamp in the sun. If there's all sunshine on the beach and you pull out your lamp and try to make light on the floor, you will barely notice it. But do you do it in the dark down here or even lower, it's way more audible. Of course it still changes the character of our main instrument up here. Doesn't mean that it's useless. I'm just saying that it's more strong given down here. And this now is being modulated. This means that if you notice when I play, sometimes when this is all bent back to default, sometimes the notes sound way softer. So this is of course just an example now. You wouldn't set it up like this maybe, except you're really going for the sound. But this would, again, it's too much, you lose too much of control. So either you would bring these a little bit up so you don't have the strong difference between no modulation at all. So if I play now, yeah, it's still too strong. So you still, when it goes back to default, it's sounding like the notes get really weaker. But you get the idea. So you don't need to do this with an LFO. Of course, you can. Let's remove this. We can take our envelope tree and do this with envelope tree. Bring this in a little bit here and there, everywhere. Then just as an idea, right? So you can see this is It's not the best sounding patch here, but you get the idea. And then we can of course dial in this modulator here louder if we want, or simply mess with the semitones. Or bring this up. Okay, just some sloppy playing, but this basically, like, this is the pitch of our oscillator, which we can't hear because it's down. But as I told you earlier here, when we have modulation applied and we change the pitch here as well, it has an effect on the waveform. And this is of course true for this here as well. So this is really, really low, and the lower our pitch is, the slower it swings, which means this here is starting to get slower. And the higher notes that I play, the quicker this is going. So if I play a low note, this is really, really slow, because we have a slow movement of a waveform and then the slow minus 36 semitones from a modulator. If I play a higher note, has a pretty cool effect. This almost reminds me of the Blade club team from the Blade movie. But here it is like, I can't give you a sketch and say do this and this to make Wavetables sound good. You really need to experiment each time, because every waveform is different. They all sound different, so even if I change this now to this one, we will have a completely different sound with the same settings. This makes it a little bit like a pad. So yeah, this is basically what wavetables are and how you can use them. And you can as always modulate this, and your three common options are envelopes, LFOs, and functions, and randomizers, of course. We could take a randomizer and, like add random values all the time, which will sound really weird now because the envelope are still being routed to there, but here you get the idea. also plenty of ways to bring life to this and play this with some energy. And regarding FM synthesis, so let's go back to our analog module. And let's get away from this. So about FM, there's not a lot stuff to say because we have used this in the past and you know how it works. You have just this little amount button here which feeds oscillator 3 into 2 and 1, and you can turn it off here if you want. And you can take the source of modulation. So if you don't want oscillator 3 to be the source, you can take the white noise here, which doesn't do a lot, it's just what it is. But, and therefore I show you something in Dune 2 about FM synthesis, because I told you FM usually is a little bit more complex. So this is my Dune 2 synthesizer now. And if we bring this to FM, what you see here is that this is how FM usually looks like. It's a little bit more complex than what they show here. And you have way more options. So in this case, FM has by default a little metallic and bell-like sound. This is the character of FM usually. And as you can see here on this algorithm, oscillator A is going out, being fed back into itself, but it's also being fed into B, and then it's being fed into C. And basically, you know, like we go here from 3 into 2 and 1, or by taste you can deactivate one of both. But you get the idea, right? This is being fed into the others. So here you can change the algorithm. You can say, I rather want this one, or I rather want this one. In this case, A goes into C, and B goes into C as well, and gets fed into itself as well. And by A, B, and C, they have laid it out here already, A, B, and C. So we don't need 3 oscillators. We just need this section here. And with the amount, we can say how much of this, let's say oscillator we want to have. And by ratio we can determine the speed and the frequency. So bring in some delay. Not the most beautiful sound, like FM usually really takes time to shape well. But just to give you the idea what it sounds like usually, it's really more like a bell. So you can hear better now because I turned down the wetness of these room creating FX plugins. And this way you can make it smoother. So you notice this has a lot of resonance. You can bring it all the way down the ratio and then then of course you can mix it with normal oscillators together. I mean the same way you do it here. Here it is getting modulated by everything, but if you turn this off, then you have one FM oscillator, if you want to say so, and one normal. But this is the concept behind FM, just so you have seen a little bit more what it looks like. And usually if you purchase a synthesizer that is completely focused on FM, a true FM filter synthesizer, you will actually have way more of these buttons and way more algorithms and stuff to deal with. So this is a really, really, really dumbed down version of it, so you can use it a little bit to get some of this frequency modulation effect, but it's really bare bones here. So see you in the next episode.